The principal way to control your audio mix in Unreal Engine is through the Sound Class Mix and Sound Class systems. By assigning different sets of sounds to different sound classes, we can effectively group them, making it easier to control the overall mix. If we go to location 4 in the demonstration level, you might remember from an earlier video, this is where the Wood Fairy asks you to find some magical mushrooms for her.
Welcome. To enable the magic in the first stone circle, you must first collect 3 mushrooms from the forest. When you have them, bring them back to me. Listen carefully, and they will call to you.
Now the first mushroom is quite visible. And as we get closer, you can hear the sound. But the remaining mushrooms are hidden in these trees, so are harder to find. What we're going to do is create a kind of listen mode or detective mode that will slightly increase this sound in volume while decreasing the volume of all the other sounds. This kind of listen mode is quite common in games and allows the player to block out the sounds that are irrelevant and focus on the ones that are essential. Most often this will be the non-player character's speech or foley so that you know where enemies are and what they're doing. The key challenge to mixing in a game is to identify the most important sounds for a player to hear at any given time. So let's take a look at this mushroom sound. We'll open up the blueprint. And we can see here in the Play Sound 2D that it's playing this sound cue. And in this sound cue you can see that it's been assigned to the master sound class. Now this is just the default sound class that sounds are assigned to when you import them, and it actually belongs in the engine folder. You can change this default sound class in the project settings audio menu, and there's some good reasons why you might want to do that we'll be coming on to a bit later. The sound class that a sound belongs to can be set either in a sound cue, as is the case here, or in a sound wave. So if we sync to browser, we can also set them here. If we open up that sound class, we can see a variety of settings that we'll be talking about. The key one we're interested in right now is volume. Looking in the content browser, you can see that we've set up a number of different sound classes here. If you're from a music production background, you might be familiar with the idea of mixer groups or buses. So say you've got your drum kit all nicely recorded to individual channels, and you can control the individual volumes of the snare and the hi-hat and the toms, etc. When you come to mix the drums along with the rest of the instruments, that's actually going to be a problem because you're going to run out of fingers to control the mixer faders. So what you might do is send all of these signals to a mix group or bus called drums, and this will allow you to control the overall volume of this group of sounds at the same time. So if we open up the Epic Audio hierarchy here, you can see that we've set up different sound classes or different groups of sounds. So sound effects, dialogue and music, character sounds, ambient sounds, etc. We'll be looking at this in a bit more detail in the next video. Let's go back to the woods and see what sounds are actually playing. We use the stat sounds console command. We can see that there's a loop, ASABAL underscore Magic Forest. And if we find that in the content browser, here, you can see that that sound has been set to the area loops sound class. And there's some other one-shots, so like the trees, wind, O2. That has been set to a different sound class called Area One Shots. Now back to our content browser. If we select the sound class, what we can actually do here is solo that sound class. So at the moment we're only going to hear area loops. And now we could solo the one-shots. So already that's quite useful, and we can also play around with their settings live to set our audio mix. To create our listen mode, let's create a new sound class, and let's call it mushrooms. And let's assign the sound of those mushrooms to that new sound class. So how do we control the volume of these sound classes? Well, we do that through a sound class mix. So let's create a new one, and let's call it Mushroom Detective. If we open that up, you can see that we can add here sound class effects and choose a sound class. And then this sound class mix allows us to adjust the volume, pitch, and filter frequency of that particular sound class. So in the mushrooms case, we want to maybe bump it up a little. And at the same time, we want to bring down the volume of the other sound classes in that same region. So we know that the ambient or area loops are being played. So let's select those. And for the moment, let's just turn the volume down to 0. We also know that there's some area 1 shots. And again, we'll turn them down to 0. Now for our listen mode, I'm going to set its duration to be 4 seconds. So when we instigate it, it's going to last for 4 seconds, and then it's going to maybe fade out over 2 seconds. So this is the amount of time which all these settings are going to interpolate back to their default settings. So now we've got all our sounds assigned to their specific sound classes, and we've set up a sound class mix. We want to trigger this mix to be applied. For demonstration purposes, we'll do this in the level blueprint. So we'll open up the level blueprint, find an empty space, and we're going to just set up an input key to trigger the detective mode for the time being. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to find the number pad key 5, and I'm going to use that to instigate a sound class mix. So if we right click and we search for anything to do with sound mix, you can see our options here, and we're going to turn that on. So we're going to push a sound mix modifier. And the sound mix modifier we're going to push is the one we just created, called Mushroom Detective. Okay, so when I play the game and I press the number pad key 5, it's going to call that sound class mix. That sound class mix is going to turn the volume of the mushroom up a bit, and it's going to, for the moment, turn the area loops and area 1 shots off. So let's try that. And I'm going to press my key now. So the mushroom sounds increased, everything else is turned off. And it lasted for 4 seconds and then went back to its original settings. So if I do that again, then gradually over 2 seconds, the sounds start coming back in. Now, if I wanted that sound class mix to hold indefinitely, then what I could do is edit it. And if I set the duration to be -1, then that means it will hold indefinitely until it's switched off. And the way to switch it off is to pop the sound class mix. So pop sound mix modifier. So we'll select the same one because that's the one we want to turn off here. And let's just put in a flip-flop. So it will switch between those 2 modes. And let's just go back to our sound mix. Just double check. Let's just do it over a few more seconds so we can hear those fade in and fade out times. And the whole thing's just a little bit more subtle. Okay, so let's pick up that first one, because that's the easy one. We're now looking around for our others. We're not really hearing them. So let's instigate that mix. The sound's gradually faded out. I can hear mine a lot better now. And I can find my second lot of mushrooms. And I can switch that off. Now, having that mix on permanently, toggling it on and off, might suit some kinds of gameplay. But I think maybe a better idea is to toggle that off when we pick the mushrooms up. So let's go back to our level blueprint and let's take that out. So I'm going to push that. It's going to turn on my mushroom detective. I'm going to go back to the mushroom pickup blueprint. And this is the point when I press E and I'm near a mushroom that we've picked the mushroom up. So if I put that pop sound mix modifier here, we've got a nice little system where I can search for my mushrooms and I can hear them. And as soon as I pick it up, then everything resets. Let's go back to our sound class mix again and make everything a little bit more subtle. So instead of turning those off completely, let's drop them by maybe 0.3. Maybe we keep the volume of the one shots the same, but maybe we just filter them out. So we take the top end off them. Let's have a listen and see how that sounds. I'm just going to turn off that stat sounds console command and turn on another one, which is stat sound mixes. Then we can see which mixes are active at any given time. So I've just got a master mix on at the moment. Going to instigate my mushroom detective sound mix by pressing the number pad key 5. And you can see that takes effect and you can hear, because everything's gone quiet apart from the mushrooms. Pick that up and the sound mix has reset to the master mix. I go looking for some more mushrooms, press 5 again. So my listen mode is active and I can hear the mushroom more clearly and go and pick it up. Just going back to our mushroom sound class, we'll be looking at some of these other settings in future videos, but there's one I just wanted to mention now, and that relates to audio volumes in games. So you might remember that audio volumes are used to control reverb in the games and also to control some basic occlusion through the ambient zone settings. So if we go back to the cave, you can see here, this is an audio volume and it's used to control reverb and also ambient zones. Now, in order for these to work on your sounds, it all depends on the sound class that the sound is assigned to. So we can see here in the mushroom sound class that apply ambient volumes is unchecked. Therefore, those ambient zone settings won't actually work on any sounds that are assigned to this class. So let's just correct that now, presuming that we want those ambient zones to be applied. And the other thing is, in the submix section, this send to master reverb submix, that's on by default here, but you need to be careful that that is applied if you want any reverb settings that use the audio volumes in your level to be applied to sounds. So all of those things depend on these settings within sound classes. So that's why you need to be a little bit careful when you import a sound and it is automatically assigned to the master sound class, which is in the engine folder. So let's just find that. This is a classic puzzling error when you're using Unreal Engine, is you brought in your sounds and you're playing away, and for some reason the occlusion system doesn't seem to be working at all. And that's probably because your sound, when you imported it, has been set by default to belong to this master sound class. The master sound class does not have apply ambient volumes ticked. So you might want to open up your project settings and go to audio so that the default sound class is set to something else. In our instance, we'll say, we'll set it to just the top of the hierarchy. And so when we do bring sounds in, they're going to be assigned to this sound class here, and that has apply ambient volumes checked, and it has center master reverb submix checked as well. In this video, we've seen how you can group sounds into sound classes to make mixing easier, the equivalent to using groups or buses on a traditional mixing desk. We've looked at sound mixes and how these are used to control the sound classes by being either pushed on or popped off. By combining sound classes and sound mixes, you can dynamically change the mix of your game by altering the volume of sounds either on an individual or a group basis. In order to do this most effectively, it's worth working out a hierarchy of audio groups, and we'll be looking at this in the next video.